Only 32% of children. That's the problem. That's what's missing. It's God's truth. Why? Kids are it's very simple. 52 hours a week is a lot more than 30 minutes a week. What do I mean by that? The average child's on the screen 52 and a half hours a week. The average child only half go to church, and those that do go there an hour. That's 30 minutes.
Because we're going to be talking about kids. We're going to be talking about the things that influence our kids and how this plays out. And it always takes me back to how important our kids are to us. And when we think about this, we start looking at like Psalms 127:3, where it says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward." And so when we start looking at how God looks at children, he see this importance he puts on them and how we should take care of them, then we really start to unpack how we need to start stocking up in our own pantries on how to protect them. And I think today's guest is one of those guests that can bring us right to that point, especially with some of the projects that he has going.
Absolutely. I think that when we think about the pantry for an adult, play might not be a big canister on the shelf, although I think that it should be to some degree, but it looks different. Whereas for kids, that's a huge portion. It's how they learn. It's how they get their energy out. It's how they grow. It's how the Lord speaks to them in a lot of ways. And so that is what we're talking about today. And we're bringing on a guest that we think is perfect for this. His name is Brent Dusing. He's created TruPlay to bring excellent, fun, beautiful, and biblically authentic entertainment to audiences worldwide. He's an entrepreneur at heart and pioneered game creation with Christian content through Lightside Games, which was a gaming studio reaching more than 7 million game players worldwide and resulting in 25,000 decisions for Christ. So welcome, Brent.
Hey,
Thank you.
welcome.
Good to be with you guys today. How are you?
Oh, good. It's
We're doing well.
awesome to always have people on who are making good things.
Yes.
Because I think we look at the world sometimes, get a little overwhelmed on these good things. And I think coming out of the box, I want to hit everybody with a hard verse, because I think this comes to what you guys are doing. And I think it really plays in. And I'm throwing a little verse in more than I normally would up front, but I think it's because of the importance that I think all three of us have with children. And when we sit there in Matthew 18, it says, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and if he were drowned in the depths of the sea," right?
Woof.
But watch, woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offenses come. And what I see in you, brother, is someone who said, we're not bringing no offenses to our children. I don't want no millstone around my neck. I want to put good content out there that glorifies God.
And the Bible's very clear. We're all going to have to stand in front of God and account for what we did with our lives. And I also thought about, there's a common thing that happens when you talk to people about their lives, adults, and they talk about their past emotional trauma or hang-ups or how come it, and they'll often get back to their childhood. Well, my parents didn't do this, or I didn't have that, or I was abused, or I was this. And I'm not dismissing that. That's valid. I get it. But then there's some point in your life as an adult that you have to realize you're the adult in the room. And I think that our generation, those of us who are Gen X or the first half of the millennials, people who have, those of us who have children still in our homes, really aren't doing a great job as an aggregate. Now, I'm sure a lot of listeners are, because if you're listening to this show, you care about the stuff. And half of success is caring about the outcome anyway, right? Amen. But in general, as a society, it's horrible. Our scorecard is terrible. Why? Well, anxiety, suicide, and depression rates are all-time highs for kids. All-time highs. We're the most prosperous society in the history of mankind. Well, at least since the Garden of Eden, right? And yet, so there's always this talk, it's just more government money, more intervention, more drugs, more medicine. We're heavily medicated. It's not a lack of medication or money.
Right.
What's missing? Well, we'll get to that. Second thing, the average male is exposed to pornography when he's 11 years old. And we know, I'm sure you've talked about this, the terrible effects that has on the boy as he gets older, et cetera. The worst statistic, well, for the first time in our life, less than half of Americans go to church. Right. Worse than that, 62% of Americans over 40 believe in God. That's actually pretty good. But only 32% of children. That's the problem. That's what's missing. It's God's truth. Why? It's very simple. 52 hours a week is a lot more than 30 minutes a week. What do I mean by that? The average child's on the screen 52 and a half hours a week. The average child only half go to church, and those that do go there an hour. That's 30 minutes. So 100-to-1, what are they doing on screens? You guys know, YouTube, social media, a lot of games, right? And I'm not here to tell you all games are bad. They're not. There's a lot of benign games. There's a lot of bubble gum. You're talking about junk food today. There's bubble gum, but there's also poison. There's a lot of poison, right? There's a lot of rat poison and toxins mixed into the content that kids are getting. And some of it's so blatant, it's not even mixed in. It's like, that's what they're selling. It's the point. Like, hey, just come chew poison. Oh, great.
Right.
That's really. And so what I realized was about why did we get started? Because nobody was delivering great content for kids. It wasn't that there was a lack of Christian content. There was a lack of Christian content that was awesome and compelling and fun and exciting, right? Here's the metaphor we'd use. Too often, Christian entertainment in the past was sold as Robitussin. Please drink this. It'll help your cough. You need it. No, I know it doesn't taste very good, but you need to drink this. That's how it was sold. What we do at TruPlay was we're providing wonderful games and video content, cartoons and comics that are like eating chocolate cake, except that there's vitamins and protein and calcium stuffed in it. So the kid's eating it for breakfast, and mom's like, wait, they're eating chocolate cake for breakfast, but you look at the nutritional content on the side of the box, it's better than the cereal you were going to feed them. Right. And that's what we have to do. And so back to kind of the verse you opened up with, I just thought a lot about not on my watch. I'm not going to stand in front of God and the answer be, yeah, I got busy. I was pursuing this other thing, because we're only where we are, by God's grace, but also because the leaders who came before us, right? The spiritual giants that preceded us. Mm-hmm. And suddenly it's our generation starting to take that mantle for the youngest children. Why? Because there's not anybody standing up for young kids. Think about that. Think about, there are some wonderful organizations in the world that serve children in developing nations. Samaritan's Purse, Compassion International, World Vision, I think, is close to where you guys are based. Great organizations. How many organizations are serving the interest and needs of children in America at scale? Right?
Super duper small.
Right.
It's almost no one.
And it's just now budding, like right now.
Yeah.
This is when it's starting.
Yeah. So that's what got me, is like, we have to stand up for this next generation of children, because they're being attacked in very nefarious ways. Especially in a lot of it's, also in the schools, but also in the content that's being thrust upon them.
Who was that big person in your life that brought you to where you are, or how did that transpire? Because I'm telling you, people with passion generally have something that's behind them that like says, here, this is going to help push.
People say, God's ways are greater than our ways, and it's true. And sometimes God's ways don't make sense, but they do start to make more sense when you look at your life in reverse. It's harder to see it forward, right? But it makes a lot more sense when you start rewatching the videotapes, right?
Right.
And so a lot of the experiences that I had in my life prepared me for this, whether it was, when I was I was born in the late 70s. I'm a very, late Gen X. So what I grew up watching, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, and Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, right? And even as laughable as this is, even the heroes that were like Hulk Hogan in the 80s and, Rambo, they were at least, as violent as Rambo was, like Rocky was a great example. They were mostly fighting for the good. All the other stuff aside, they were basically, and especially for young boys to have role models to be men, especially Superman and Luke Skywalker, they were using their strength and abilities to go against long odds, stand up and do what was right, ultimately for the benefit of other people. So, Superman 2, maybe the most underrated superhero movie ever, he gives up his life with Lois Lane, the love of his life, to go fight Zod and the other two criminals to save the world, because, that was the only chance they had, right? Luke Skywalker, he's in his training in Dagobah, and he walks away from Yoda, and he says, no, my friends are going to die. I have to do this. You're going to get killed. Yeah, but I can't just let this happen. And so watching those kind of things and that impression, and seeing the impression it had on me as a child of the 80s, that ultimately, and if you think about it, that was almost the last decade we had as a culture where virtue was commonly taught through the culture. And what I mean by that is, fast forward to the 90s, you started to have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which came right after, kind of when I became into teenagehood, that next generation of kids got into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where it got to be a little bit more sarcastic, a little bit more meaningless. Movies like the Tarantino movies of the 90s, where the point was there almost was no point, right? Where the music, the grunge music movement, where there was almost no life is meaningless and hopeless, and Beck's song I'm a loser, things like that, that even though that was done in sarcasm, I don't know that everybody realized that was sarcasm. I think a lot of people just took that on as like their theme song. Some of the kids I knew did. And so I feel like since the 90s, so much and through on in our culture in America, it's become about pointlessness and hopelessness and sarcasm. And God has continued to become extracted out of the cultural conversation. It's not that he's left, it's that everyone's run away. Like in the Garden of Eden, they sin and God says, where are you? Well, he knew where they were. What he meant was, where did you go in your heart? Where are you in a relationship to me? And that's really how our culture got to. So that you ask where's the passion come from? I guess because I feel that, children deserve a great upbringing. They deserve to be told the truth. They certainly don't deserve to be abused and preyed upon. And we are living, it's so bizarre that we live in this culture now where there's so many kind of blatantly offensive things that happen to kids that just kind of get tossed by the wayside, just kind of get ignored and moved on. And that has to change.
I mean, we definitely agree. And when you were talking about, the cake full of nutrients, I thought of several things like from the food analogy realm, but I think one of the perfect ones is this idea that back in the day, what did we use to cook food with? We used lard, we used beef tallow, we used, butter.
Sure.
And then what happened? It was like, that was just the norm.
Crisco.
And look at the health. Look at the health of people. They were eating this at large and they were mostly okay. Then Crisco comes on the scene, vegetable oils come on the scene, like all these different things. And it's not that the truth changes, it's that the messaging changes. And suddenly the good is vilified. And the new thing that's going to bring people a new type of buck, a different group of people, their dollar and their time to shine, that gets virtued up into the culture. And so what happens? They start telling lies about lard and about tallow. And now guess where we are all these decades later? Decades of heart disease, diabetes, chronic obesity. Guess where we're at? People are realizing that beef tallow and lard, when you're taking out the BHT and all these other harmful things that they inject into the animals, when you get a good, clean animal and you use its fat, you're good to go. And so I think that is kind of what you're saying, is that it's never been perfect. Like in heaven, we won't need to use animal fat to cook anything. Food's just going to be great, whatever it is we eat, probably fruits and veggies. Who knows? I don't know to what degree we'll eat like breads and bacons, but whatever, it'll be fine. We won't have to worry about any of this. But while we're here, the best we've got to our knowledge is the lard and the tallow. And you're saying, can we please give these kids lard and tallow instead of swearing up and down that Crisco is a real food group? That's not what this is supposed to be about. And it's like, that's kind of how the messaging shifts. Like right now, virtue, they're still painting people in the same light, but they're painting the villain in the light of having the virtue. They're painting the villains as the ones that were misunderstood and mistreated. So please pity them.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, you look at like it's interesting to talk about kind of generations and the next generation of children, but you guys may know, somebody said, we demonize our lions and we lionize our demons in today's culture. And we absolutely do that. We people like when Billy Graham died 5 years ago, not everybody realizes he was the most viewed human being in the history of human civilization in terms of the number of people who saw him in person. He also still stands as the record of the most people who attended like an event at one time, which was this event they did in Korea. In fact, they just had the 50th anniversary of that. My friend Will Graham and Franklin Graham went out there in Korea to celebrate that event. And Billy Graham dies, and it wasn't even that big of a thing from a news media standpoint, right? And you look at like the impact he had, and you can look at data on the number of people who went to church and or the number of people who became pastors, the number of people who believe in the Bible, or the presidents that he knew, or Dwight Eisenhower converting to Christianity after going into being the president because of his relationship with Billy Graham. Now, there were other people involved too. It wasn't Billy Graham all by himself. There was a movement. But my point is, all those phenomenal things that really we all benefited from don't get talked about. And all these people who passed away recently, it's like we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? But now it's our job as parents and as the adults in the room, if you will, who are in the middle of our life, the primes of our lives, to prop up the next generation of children who not only have few advocates, they have many enemies.
So with your video game platform, what drew you to that? Like there's a lot of things out there that a person can choose to go after, and you guys chose to go after video games.
Well, it is, video games are the number one thing that kids spend their time doing if you look at the data. So here's an interesting statistic. More money was spent on games just on phones and tablets last year than on movie tickets in theaters. People don't realize how big it is because, movies still have this cultural cachet. The Academy Awards have become less relevant. They used to be the biggest thing, who's going to win and what movie and who's the best supporting actor, best director, and all those things. Video games have always been kind of seen as this, diversion almost, a silliness. But if you look at most people in this country who are 50 and under grew up with games because the Nintendo was really the watermark event for video games, just like Star Wars was for movies. Right, where everything, it was a step function, everything changed. When the Nintendo Entertainment System came out in people's homes in the 80s, it changed the way that the culture's relationship with video gaming. And then they've just gotten better over time in terms of quality and things with the Xbox and the PlayStation and so forth. And of course, Facebook did gaming in the late 2000s, and then in the early 2010s, then you had the explosion of smartphones and the success of gaming on, things like Angry Birds and Candy Crush and, games that we all know. So for us, it was, look, number one, what did Jesus do? He met people where they are. Sure, he preached in the synagogues, but a lot of times he was out on the fields, at the fishing docks, at the weddings, right, et cetera, parties. So we have to be where people are. Right now, kids are on screens, number one. Number two, there's a lot of ways to drive engagement and depth and tell a lot of different stories. So in TruPlay, in the platform we have, it's a subscription platform with a bunch of games, videos, comics with new content coming out all the time. And so there's a lot of different stories there. So in other words, games allow you to tell different stories. And each of these games you can play for hours and hours and hours, each of them. So there's a way that we have the story of stained glass, which is you're telling Old Testament stories. There's a story of Maple, who I have on my shirt, which is a little girl in a bunny rabbit in a tiger costume. She's very precocious and she's very headstrong. She's a strong believer in God, but she kind of charges headlong into this forest and finds out on this rescue mission to rescue this lost child and realizes there's a much deeper, sinister plot that's twisted and changed the meaning of words and values in their society, and she has to kind of uncover that whole thing. And there's a story about a boy named Lucas who is a skunk in a crocodile robot outfit whose brother died, and he doesn't really know who God is, and he struggles with the whole loss, and he goes on this grand adventure in space with laser beams and bad guys to kind of go find out what really happened. And so I'm saying this because with video games you can tell so many different stories and weave God's truth in so many different ways, and also deliver experiences to people that I think are really unique and engaging, and really the way that a lot of people process. If you look at where kids spending their time, well, they're on Fortnite, they're on Minecraft, they're on Roblox. In fact, there's a lot of thought in the technology world that the next social networks will feel a lot more like social video games than they'll feel like Facebook and Twitter 1.0, like for the next generations. Right. Just meaning that the way that children are expecting to communicate and engage is very much gamified. And so that's right where we're bringing God's truth to.
I'll go ahead and say up front, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to reveal that where I am in the middle. But there's the two sides. I like to always point out the polar side. So there's the side that's like, no, we need to completely dive into culture, but we need to inject Christ absolutely everywhere we can. And then there's the other side who says, well, why are we letting our kids on screens if they're so damaging? Like, for example, when the iPhone first came out, teen depression and suicide rates went up. Like, I will say skyrocketed.
Yes.
They went up huge,
Yes.
just because they now had access to a phone. So there's the people who are like, all of this, they're not full Amish in like, no, everything that has a plug is bad, but they're like, why are we even giving our kids screens? Like, let them go outside and play, give them this, you know, keep them busy in other ways. And then there's the other side, it's like, well, let them do it, but make it Christian, right?
Sure.
So kind of where are you personally with the wisdom you've gleaned from being a parent and also from being in this industry? Like, where kind of do you sit?
Sure. Well, I've thought a lot about it. And of course, you know, starting TruPlay and running TruPlay and having built a lot of Christian games, thought a lot about this. Here's my take. I guess the punchline is, I believe we've got to be right where people are in the culture, delivering God's truth. And I'll tell you why. One, if you think about when we grew up in the 80s, and a lot of pastors who I respect, and this is no casting no aspersions, it was, don't watch this movie, don't listen to that music, don't watch that TV show. Oh, okay, fine, but what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to watch Andy Griffith from the 1950s. I'm not. And I'm not going to watch some cheesy low-budget thing that somebody made with a good message. I'm sorry, I'm just not. I can't do that. I can't engage with that. And it's noble to say, well, my kids will just play outside for 8 hours a day. And if you can do that as a parent, God bless you. I am not able to do that as a parent. And I think there's one parent I know who's been able to pull it off, and hundreds of parents that I know. Because the reality is, right, the experience is so rich and it's right there. And then even if you don't have screens in your house, the minute your kid goes to someone else's house, it's just, you know, a switch gets flipped in their mind.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. So we realize we've got to build entertainment content that's on par, that's as good as what else they're getting out there, but God's truth has got to be infused with it. And we believe we've achieved that with TruPlay. Now, I'll also say the medium, it's not, the medium can be used for anything. You can watch, let's look at The Chosen. Those guys have done a phenomenal job, right? Building a TV show about Jesus and, you know, what things were like for him and the apostles. Well, you can watch that TV show, or you can go watch, you know, pornography. You can watch a pornographic TV show. You know, you can read the Bible, that's a book, or you can go read a pornographic magazine, or you know, so you can go listen to praise and worship music or satanic music. You know, there's so many different mediums we could point out to. And I think sometimes parents who may not have grown up playing video games, or might go say, well, look, Grand Theft Auto is a video game, it's terrible. Yeah, it is terrible. But I think if you played TruPlay, or if you experienced that, you would see what your child got out of it, and you might actually find, as a parent, you might enjoy it yourself.
Right.
So I think we've got to be right there in the relevant medium. And again, Jesus is the perfect example of that, because he was not just preaching at the synagogues, which is what people expected, but show up to a wedding. Oh, you're out of wine? Sure, I can help with that. Oh, you're fishing at the dock? Oh, you can't catch any fish? Yeah, I can help you with that. Oh, you came to hear me preach and you out of food? Yeah, I can help you with that. You know, he was right there, wherever they were.
And I think that one of the things that we're always concerned about as parents, and one reason why people might go very far in this direction, keep them off of it, is because, one, they may not have confidence and they may not feel armed to galvanize their kids. But here's the truth: the Holy Spirit's job is to do that. And if you're emulating a life of Christ, then what happens in anyone's life, including your own, is your heart changes, your taste buds change for what you actually want. Yeah. And then you don't necessarily have to worry. I don't have to worry going into certain stores if I'm going to roam into some inappropriate aisles. Yeah. Or I don't have to worry just because it exists and just because it's there, because I genuinely don't want it. Some of it I've tasted and seen it's terrible, and at the time I thought it was great, but now I see more clearly. And so things like this allow us the opportunity, and this is what we do with our own daughters. She has her own iPad now that is only specific amounts of time in specific scenarios that she uses. The things on the iPad are highly selective. And she's 4 years old. She's always talking about the Lord, and she loves it. And she, of her own volition, is saying things like, that doesn't look that good to me, about things that there's kids that eat it up because of where she is. Right. And so I think that this is the perfect example, and what TruPlay is doing, and what The Chosen is doing, and what a lot of these are, is they're offering a tool that we can use to reinforce and show in creative ways what we're talking about at the dinner table, you know, and what we're living out in our daily life.
Well, we know children ingest. And we know that children ingest because even Christ said it. Christ said, hey, I want you to have minds like children. I want you to be like children. I want you to have the faith like children. And see, what are we pouring into our children? And that's what I'm getting out of this too. It's like, okay, I'm in that middle ground too. I'm like, okay, cool. You know what? It's going to be there. I've watched my little girl go to church, and I'm like, okay, I want to make sure, you know, I'm trying to watch what she watches and take care of it. And then you got the little boy who shows up with an iPad, and she's over his shoulder, and she's watching Blue's Clues. Okay, but at the same time, she's not taking away the same things that they're taking away because she has a foundation in something that's good. And I know that what was put in front of me, and actually, watch this, it wasn't even put in front of me. We weren't the richest family. We didn't have all that stuff, but guess what? My friends did.
Yep.
So then on that note, in your realm of this gameplay, because I know not everyone's going to sit there and do TruPlay, right? Because I mean, everybody has like, I talked to that, again, that kid at work today. You know, I'm asking about which games do you play? And he's like, well, I play this one, this one, this one, and this one. So is there other people out there or you guys, you know, coming out with different scenarios, different gameplay that people can ingest?
Yeah, so what we're doing at TruPlay is it's one app, you download it, and it's got a bunch of games inside it. And these are games you can play for hours and hours. So there's dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of content on TruPlay, and we add new stuff all the time. And a lot of it are, you know, most of it's content that we've built, but we actually have, if you're familiar with the Action Bible, one of my very favorite, right? So we have comics from the Action Bible. So we partner with them.
Oh, okay, cool.
We have other people we're in conversations with to bring their content on the platform as well. So there will be games that we make, and there will also be games that other people make.
Nice.
that meets the bar of quality and also what we call God's truth. You know, it's not that every game has to be from the Bible. Certainly, like I said, there's no bunny rabbits and tiger costumes in the Bible, but there are everything has to deliver you know, God's truth in some form, and it has to be showing kind of God's truth and light, because that's who we are. That's what we do. So our brand is about fun and excellence and quality and God's truth. And so we, you know, just like in Netflix, when you come on to Netflix, you have a bunch of stuff, you know, you have murder mysteries and documentaries and sports TV shows and biographies and all these things. At TruPlay, you'll find different styles of games, different ways that stories are told to be able to draw in different interests that people have. And we're adding more and more content, you know, working as hard as we can to add as much great content for your family. And look, you said something that was interesting a few minutes ago. You said, well, it's hard as parents to keep a tab. I agree. I think it feels to most parents, you know, it's interesting. Whenever there's terrible content out and someone who makes that bad stuff gets called on the carpet, their response is, yeah, well, parents should just do a better job. Parents should just monitor what their kids do. That's kind of like, you know, when the water got poisoned in Flint, Michigan, was it the parents' fault that they let their kids drink tap water? No, you pay the water bill, you expect clean water. It was not the fault of the parents in Flint, Michigan. It was the fault of the people poisoning the water and the you know, the governmental authorities that were supposed to be monitoring, right? So when they say that to parents, I feel like most parents feel like if there's a hurricane coming to destroy your house, you're getting told, just stand on the beach and hold up your arms. You'll be fine. You'll stop the hurricane. There's no way that you can stop the onslaught of content that comes. So I feel that, so we felt like with TruPlay, okay, if we build one platform, you can go and there's no ads, there's no in-app purchases, everything's been, you know, set to a high standard of obviously biblical veracity, but also quality. So the kid, you know, gets excited about it. There's something they want to do. They're not forced to do, right? That you can have something that parents can have some peace of mind. Right. Because it's hard to watch over your kid's shoulder every 2 minutes and what are they seeing and what's like it is if they're on YouTube or if they're playing, you know, Roblox, right? Whereas it could be anything could be happening or being said. So those are some of the principles we kind of thought about as we designed the TruPlay platform, because we think probably like you guys think, which is we think parents are the best parents. Right? And what I mean by that is I don't think many of us are interested in values that we were taught were wrong being thrust on our kids from all these different sources. I don't think many of us are that interested in that, right? All the things your mama taught you was wrong are now being taught, no, it's right. It's the opposite. It's opposite day For the last
Right.
few years, it's opposite day. And so
Right.
we want to come alongside parents and say, no, we know, we stand with you in your values, and we hope to earn your trust that this is something that you know that you can have that peace of mind with your family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, no, I'm excited about the platform. Really quick, what's the age group that it's currently targeted for?
We say 5 to 12. What's really funny is we certainly have younger kids get on and enjoy some of the games. The games are built for there's different, levels of complexity. But here's the other thing. We did a lot of testing. We've been building this platform for over 3 years. So we tested with each individual game and the platform itself. And we'd have kids test a game, and then when they were done, the parent would say, "Hey, can I play that game too? Do you mind?" And so I hope that if you play our content, you use it, especially as you look at some of the games like Maple, the way the stories are told, they're really written to be enjoyed by children, but also by parents. And we find a lot of parents and adults compete with their kids because you can get different scores, obviously in different levels of progress. So we do have some big kids who play it too.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was thinking, because one of the questions that you kind of already touched on the answer for is, what does being an engaged parent look like on this platform? But you kind of, playing with them, being aware. But then at the same time, you also brought up this good point, and it's kind of like my closing thought for people to marinate on, is back in the day, it was hard / impossible / people didn't do it, watch what their kids did all day.
Yep.
There was a time when the world still wasn't perfect, bad stuff still happened, but your kids ran off and they were gone with their friends for hours, and parents survived, kids survived, and they came home not necessarily with an entirely different set of morals.
Mm-hmm.
And now we live in a time where I think we just all inherently know there is so much out to get them that has been created, both in the digital world as well as in the physical world, that we have to watch them more. But we still don't need to be literally helicoptering over them every moment of their lives, because that's damaging to them as well. It creates an unhealthy reliance on the authority figures in your life that then you carry on when you're no longer under your parents' wing and you're off in the world, and you still trust people with an authority title, and whatever they say goes. And that's what we're seeing the rehash of now. So I would definitely encourage people to check out TruPlay. We also love, the streaming apps Minnow and Yippee TV, which are kind of like the equivalent, but for kids, like TV shows. And, join supportive communities online where like Christian parents are like vetting together good books to read, redeeming things that are redeeming play, as Matt said on a previous episode. He's also from TruPlay. So before we go, do you have any last thoughts, any last encouragements for parents and people that are around young people that might be playing this game for the pantry?
Yeah, I've got some encouragements. I mean, I think that, you raise a very astute point, which is things really are worse. And there are measurable ways to see that. If you look at pornography exposure, if you look at hours on screens, if you look at, the rise of really, demonic, content, and how much more commonplace that is than it was. So those things are true. And so I know for a lot of parents, like, oh my gosh, where do we even live now? But my encouragement to parents out there is that God has a plan. He's not forgotten us.
Amen.
And he does care.
Amen.
And I hope for those who don't know God that he really loves us and he cares about us, and he has a plan. And part of his plan is using, redemptive content. It's getting his truth out. It may look different than other forms it used to. There weren't video games 100 years ago, right?
Right.
But God has not given up on us, and he's not done, and there is hope. And I would also encourage people, if you haven't checked out TruPlay, please go to our website, TruPlay Games, TRUPLAY. Check it out. By buying a subscription or buying a T-shirt online, the more people join our movement, right? Which is, hey, we need to stand up for the next generation and make sure we don't lose this next generation, right? We owe it to them. The more people come behind the TruPlay movement, the more great content you're going to see. We're going to keep building great content. We're going to keep spreading the message to more and more children and families all throughout the country and the world. So, I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk with you guys today. It's great. Just love what you guys do and your heart for children and families. And, we know a lot of your listeners out there are, there really is a movement starting, and we're excited to be part of it.
Man.
Amen. Well, thank you for being here. And for all of our listeners, you can go again, TruPlay.com. It is a subscription-based game platform, but that is because you're getting really high quality stuff. So you can go to thepantrypodcast.com to get our 7-day devotional, Jesus Not Junk Food, and you can support us at patreon.com/thepantrypodcast. So until next time.
Bye.
Bye.